joining me on this week's 172nd Air Wing video. Today we have for review the Boeing A-18F Super Hornet. This one in the colors of the U.S. Navy Flight Demonstration Team. The team, however, has a much better known name, and that is the Blue Angels. So, this aircraft, for some of you, needs no introduction. Heck, some of you probably know about the history of this aircraft better than I do. But for those who are new to the channel or are interested in the background, I shall continue here for. So, this, out of all of the aircraft in the Blue Angels fleet, is probably the most important from a mission accomplishment perspective. And here is why I say that. As you see, the other aircraft, the 1 through 6 single-seaters, are of course used for the demonstration, and by no means is that aspect of the mission to be reduced. But the Blue Angels have another mission as well, and it is one that generally doesn't get much, shall we say, press, which is kind of ironic considering what you're about to hear. But the mission of the Blue Angels is a twofold principle. The first is, of course, the flight demonstration that we all know and love, but the second part of their mission is community outreach and community inspiration. And it's this second mission which doesn't seem to get much credit, but is probably the key to the Blue Angels still being around ever since its founding in 1946. So the community outreach mission really involves a lot of elements, one of which is, of course, the professionalism and appearance of the squadron. This is why, of course, the pilots wear those customized flight suits, why their mannerisms and training and so forth are also polished. They, of course, want to present a good image to the community when they are out and about or interacting with the public. But there's more to that than just interacting with the people and signing autographs and the like. The community outreach mission also involves giving demonstration flights to members of the public. And sometimes they will do this for members of the media. So say a news anchor in a given city, which may be hosting a Blue Angels demonstration over an air show weekend. Oftentimes the Blue Angels will take aboard a member of the local press to do a demo flight, and they will, of course, expose the civilian reporter to various aspects of flight, such as G-forces, loops, maneuvers, and so forth. And they'll also give that same performance to distinguished members of the public. So actors, entertainers, and the like. And of course, this is all done to enhance exposure and community outreach, which is a pillar of the Blue Angels mission. Understand that operating a squadron of this nature, last published in 2021, they spent $37 million on flight operations. So it's not cheap to operate a squadron of this caliber. And the military is not in the habit of burning large sums of money on flying airplanes around in the sky for joyriding purposes. So every dime that goes to this squadron and to its counterpart in the Air Force of Thunderbirds has a mission attached to it. And that mission is generating and inspiring people to become aviators, to make the decision to be a modern aviator, whether it's in the Navy or in the Air Force. It takes years. It takes years of dedication, and to be clear about it, it's such a dedicated path that in some ways you almost have to start when you're a kid, meaning you have to have the drive and the ambition as well as the desire to make certain decisions when you're a child, when you're inspired as a kid to pursue this career path, because by the time you're a teenager, that's the time in your life when you really need to have your ducks in a row to be considered for a service academy appointment or otherwise pursuing an officer training school slot or a ROTC position. So each of these accreditation routes requires hard work and planning and application of self to become an aviator in the U.S. Navy in this case, but again, also true of the U.S. Air Force. And the earlier someone is inspired to do this, the better position they'll be in life to take advantage of those opportunities if they so choose. Because if you've made certain decisions by the time you're a teenager, these avenues of military recruitment will be closed to you. And that's why, given the rigorous nature of this kind of job, there is definitely a practical mandate for a flight demonstration team to inspire people to pursue these career paths when they are young and they are dedicated to doing it. And I will say that if I had maybe been exposed to this a little bit earlier in life, maybe my decisions would have been different. But suffice it to say that the role that they have is important to communicate and continue good relations with the community. And the number 7 aircraft is rather key to this. Not only is it key in terms of giving incentive rides, it's also key in the sense of being used as a photography aircraft. So as you saw in some of the introductory footage, the number 7 aircraft, being that it of course has 2 seats with the second seat back here, will often accommodate a professional photographer who will then take photos and videos of the Blue Angels while they are doing either usually demonstrations at home base. Generally, they won't have a photography aircraft during the live demo, but feel free to correct me in the comments if that's not the case. So as demonstrated by some of the footage from YouTuber M171562, they will carry in a professional photographer in the back to take that footage and to take photos and videos, which once again will go into press materials for community involvement and for inspiration of other folks. And again, it's not a mission that is going to necessarily win awards by itself. Nobody gets a purple star for flying a photography escort mission in Blue Angels, but it's a key job. And the number 7 aircraft, the 2-seat Super Hornet, is tasked with that important role, because without the community involvement, you don't have a mission. And if you don't have a mission, you don't have a squadron. And in fact, the discussion of whether to even have the Blue Angels has come up several times in history. And the latest time it came up was in the 1970s. 2 events happened in the mid-1970s that put the future of the Blue Angels in doubt. The first was the oil crisis of the 1970s put a pinch on fuel consumption, and flying at the time 4 F-4J Phantom IIs in a demonstration squadron was a rather expensive proposition. To put that in perspective, one F-4 Phantom burned as much fuel as a fleet of 4 T-38s or F-5s. So the cost of operating the F-4s was becoming a concern in and of itself. And to add to the concerns, the Blue Angel squadrons had multiple accidents, several of them fatal, in the show season. At one point in the 1970s, they crashed so many F-4s that they stopped the season cold. They didn't even finish their demonstration plan for the year because of how many accidents they were having. And in combination of these 2 general events led to a discussion alongside similar events with the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds flying their own F-4 Phantom variants of whether it was worthwhile to continue having demonstration squadrons, whether it was worth the money. And the recruitment commands for both the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy, who are not by profession aviators, I should say, stood up for the continued existence of these teams because of the impact on the general public and the outreach that these squadrons did, which of course was not something that was directly connected to aerial activities per se, but how these teams interacted with people. And the recruitment commands made it clear that without the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds performing, they would need to revise their recruitment goals and revise them in a direction that senior military leadership would not like, as in down. So those arguments carried the day, and the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds were able to continue through the 70s onward to today. Of course, during that period of time, to address the fuel consumption issue, the Blue Angels flew A4s while the Thunderbirds continued with the T-38. And this, of course, would be the case until the 1980s when the 4th generation aircraft came online, which happened to be both higher performing and more fuel efficient to operate and easier to maintain logistically than their third generation predecessors, as personified in the F4 Phantom II. So the conversation of whether we should have a demonstration squadron or not has come up in the past, and hopefully, thanks to the good efforts of the Blue Angels, it's not a conversation that is going to happen anytime soon. So that community mission is of course vital, and that's not even one of the most important jobs that it does. So the number 7 aircraft does 2 missions. We've covered the community aspect of it, but the other mission that the number 7 aircraft does is logistical support. Suffice it to say that when the Blue Angels set up shop, they don't just hop into their airplanes, land at regional airport X, and then start flying the next day. It doesn't work that way. And there's significant planning which goes into every move that the U.S. air demonstration teams, Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels, do. And setting up shop at an airport for a demonstration is no exception. So the full process, definitely check out the U.S. Navy's public affairs as well as various interviews out there on the internet to understand the full process, because there's a lot which goes into it. But in essence, what the number 7 aircraft does there is a week before the Blue Angels are scheduled to conduct their performance, they will take the number 7 airplane and they will fly out to the airport that will be the host. And the number 7 aircraft will of course be flown by the number 7 Blue Angels, the narrator, and it will also have in the back seat the chief of maintenance, or the maintenance officer. So the two of them will fly to a site and conduct what is called an advance. And this advance process involves them flying to the airport, verifying that the facilities are what are described, that the contract details are within the bounds agreed upon by the senior organizations involved of the Navy and of course of the airport hosting authority that's going to conduct the air show. They will dot the I's, they will cross the T's. And then the number 7 Blue Angel will then proceed with the other logistical business at hand. So after landing at that airport, they will look at parking spots, areas where the 6 FA-18s, as well as number 7 and number 8, which will also act as the spares, and the C-130, Fat Albert, affectionately called. They're going to identify where all this hardware is going to be parked, how the logistics will work of taxiing. They'll also get the local frequencies and traffic patterns and published report plates, so they will get the lay of the land and take that information back and use that to develop the logistics of the demonstration, where the pilots are going to come in, where they're going to leave, where they're going to form up, what ceilings they're working with, restrictions if applicable, frequencies again, so on and so forth. All the logistical details that are involved with operating at an airport, but multiplied by 6 aircraft plus the solo. So the number 7 aircraft is the aircraft used to fly out there and make all this happen. And this is a part of the show that of course most people are unaware of entirely. I wasn't even aware that was a thing until I did research on this. So very important role, because all this information is used by the team to figure out what kind of demonstration they're going to fly, what demonstration they can fly, and what the contingencies are. So if the weather is good, they'll fly a certain show. If the weather is moderate, they'll fly a different show. If the weather is restrictive, they'll fly a low ceiling demonstration, which of course isn't as thrilling, but the priority is conducting a safe and effective demonstration within the bounds of proper aviation protocol and safety. And the number 7 Super Hornet here has an important job in doing this. So very important role, and again, it's one that definitely doesn't get much credit, but it's one that is worth sharing because it's that story which inspired me to add this one to my collection. Normally, I don't generally order demonstration airplanes because there are so many frontline aircraft that have great stories behind them, and to me it's I don't have infinite space, as many of you are obviously well aware of with your own collections, so I have to be choosy on what I order, and I just even if I had the money, I don't have the space to warehouse 8 Blue Angel Super Hornets or the full complement of the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds, Vipers, or any other air demonstration team. I don't have the space for it. This wasn't really on my radar until I listened to a couple of podcasts on the Blue Angels. There was one on the Afterburn podcast, which I definitely recommend if you haven't checked that one out. And it's an interview between the air boss, or the top pilots of the current Blue Angels and the current Thunderbirds teams, and what they both went through recently involving COVID and some of the developments that each team has had in the recent times. And it was after that that I got an understanding, okay, this is what the number 7 aircraft does and what the advanced prep involves, and the stuff that they have to do. And that inspired me to really research the story. And the more I researched into it, the more I realized that of all the Blue Angel aircraft, this is the one that deserves a spot in my collection. So that's the reason why I ordered it. And maybe it's a reason for you to consider adding it to your collection as well, even if it's not necessarily one of the headline airplanes that you will see in the demo. Now, I will say that the number 7 Super Hornet may occasionally go into the demonstration. If the Super Hornets go to a site and there's a maintenance problem with one of the single seat FA-18Es, often one of the two-seaters, number 7 and number 8, will be used as a spare. So if you go to a Blue Angels demo and you see a 2-seat like this one, or its number 8 counterpart used in the demo, it's not necessarily an accident. It's just perhaps there was a maintenance issue that came up with one of the single seaters and they had to switch to a backup aircraft to do that. So the number 7 aircraft may still participate in various demos, but that's not generally the plan. So bear in mind that even though its primary function is to be a support aircraft for the missions I've mentioned earlier, you may still see it in the demo from time to time, depending on, of course, what spare it has to fill in for, which is a great opportunity to talk about the model itself here. So the Super Hornet in question here, I think HobbyMaster has done a pretty good job of a lot of elements of it. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the color, and this is why I have it posed in this position here, because if you notice in the shadows here underneath the wing and on the side of the fuselage, when you compare the color of the blue there to the blue on top of the wing in the light, you notice it's almost two completely different colors. And this is an effect that you generally will not see in photos because the photos are, of course, rather static. So the real aircraft, which I have the privilege of seeing, not the F-18 Super Hornet, but its Legacy Hornet predecessor some years back, it does have this. Like, if you look at it in various lights and shades, you will see that the top, which is of course exposed to the sun, will be a brighter shade of blue than the shadowy areas, which will be darker. So it's a rather difficult shade of blue to nail down, because this is something that generally provokes a significant amount of discussion on the forums, because, well, what proper shade of blue is it, right? And somebody posts a photo that's in the light and it's a light shade of blue. Someone posts a photo of the same airplane and it's cloudy, or it's a darker day, so it's not as bright. And that can be a point of rather challenging, shade to capture. And I think HobbyMaster with this one did a really good job of capturing the variations in the color intensity with varying light. And I hope that my introductory shots have done a good job of showing that for you all. So the yellow, it's consistent. I like the fact that there's no different shades of yellow in different parts of the model. It's all one proper shade. The inscriptions and the names of the number 7 and number 8 pilots, which you see here, number 7 right here, and then you have Lieutenant Bratna, and then you have Lieutenant Forster Hare, which were the number 7 and number 8 Blue Angel members in the season of 2021, which is what this aircraft is depicted as during their 75th year. And the FA-18 Super Hornet label here, all of that is clear. There's no fuzziness to the text or washed out colors, which I do happen to like. So once again, good job on HobbyMaster for doing that well. Obviously, because this is a demonstration airplane, there are no weapons or targeting pods to work with, so that makes the unboxing experience extremely simple for this model. You just have the landing gear, the covers for the landing gear ports, a spot for the included, I should say, HobbyMaster stand. I generally don't use that stand when I'm doing footage because it's easier for me to repose the model for shooting video when I use like the tripod style that you see here. But there is a stand in the model box, and it does work really well. So just bear in mind if you don't see me use it, it's not because it's bad. It's just for my filming purposes, I prefer the, again, tripod setup here. So overall, I think it's a good look to it. There are a couple of points that I would suggest for improvement. The first being the missile rails here, which are accurately painted. However, if you've noticed in the introductory shots, this one on the port side of the aircraft was bent upward to a certain extent. I was able to just use gentle finger pressure and bring that back in line, but just bear in mind that if you want to handle the model, you probably don't want to touch the missile rails there because there's a possibility you might bend it. So I'm not sure how that happened, but I didn't even notice it was crooked until I took the footage, and I'm like, well, probably should fix that before I do the full review here. So here it is, lined up as it should. And again, thankfully it was a relatively straightforward correction, but bear that in mind when you get yours. If you have to get yours by shipping, as I did, thank you Flying Mule, by the way, for getting this in such a timely fashion so I could do this review and get this out to you guys while it's still relatively in stock. So hat tip to those folks. But back to the pylon here, just make sure that when you take delivery that this is straight, and just use gentle finger pressure to get it back in line if it's not. Another point of improvement would be the pylons, the engine nozzles here. So the nozzles on this one are like a generic flat silver, and I'm not sure if I feel like they almost didn't paint them in the factory or something, because when I compare it to my A-18G, the Growler's engine nozzles are much more defined shade of titanium silver. So I'm not sure if that's an oversight or if this is the intended color, but either way, the engine nozzles are definitely something I would like to see some improvement on in future releases. If the interior here, if that were painted black and the outside were painted a bit more convincing shade of titanium, I think it would really set the model off. And another point of discussion in terms of changes that I'll bring up are the engine intakes. So the engine intakes are modeled fairly correctly on this rendition of the Super Hornet, and what I'm about to say could probably be compared to the normal version as well, meaning the non-Blue Angels iteration, but the interior of the intakes on the Super Hornet is white. So all these parts that you see here are blue, they should be, but then once you get past the face of the interior of the intakes, it's white all the way back to the face of the GEF 404 compressor blades. So I would have liked to see the block off plate that's in the model to be painted something other than blue. If that were painted like an off-white gray, just like the interior of the actual airplane, that would have looked pretty good. I don't think HobbyMaster needs to go to the step of putting like a fake compressor face in there or anything, but just if they had painted that like off-white or cream white, that would have looked really nice and classy and brought an extra sense of finishment to the model. Another thing that I'll note is the position of the Blue Angel's crest on the nose. So for the port side right here, it is in the correct position. However, on the left side of the aircraft, it is not. On the left side, it is actually too close to the middle. So where it's at on the left side is correct. Where it is on the starboard side, it is centered, which is not correct. It should be a little closer to the back of the landing gear doors. You'll see that when you compare the model to the introductory shots. And there was one, or actually two more changes that I made. The first change that I actively made, besides the pylon that I mentioned earlier, is the nose here has some silver, a little silver dot there. I added that, added a little titanium bit of paint there to reflect the actual cap of the nose cone on the real FA-18 Super Hornet. And then I also repainted the helmets of the crew. And I did this because when they come out of the box, they're just flat, generic HobbyMaster gray, which obviously is not accurate to what the Blue Angels will actually wear. So the Blue Angels pilots, they are issued yellow helmets, which is what you see, of course, in the pilot seat there, where Lieutenant Brittis would sit. In the back, I have painted the helmet blue. And I've done this because when the Blue Angels will do an incentive ride or a public relations ride, however you want to call it, for a member of the public, whether that's a media or a famous actor or what have you, they will give them a blue helmet to use during that flight. So I wanted the colors of the helmets to symbolize what the airplane's mission would actually be, which is part of course, the community involvement role of doing a demo ride for the public. So that's what I have there. I wonder if the photographers wear blue helmets too. I'm kind of curious on that. If you know, let me know in the comment section if the photographers that do photography rides in the number 7 Super Hornet, if they do happen to wear just something generic like a off-white or white helmet, or if they are given a blue one just like they do for like the anchors and the actors and so forth. So let me know what you all understand about that. So there are some flaws here, but nothing that I would consider a deal breaker. And one of the reasons why I'm glad the Flying Mule got this one out to me as quickly as they did is because I can turn around a video review and get this to you guys in a relatively short period of time, because this is obviously a Blue Angels release. There's always high demand whenever a demonstration model is released. So this is not going to sit on the shelf for 6 months at discount. This model is probably going to be sold out relatively close to spring of 2023 when I'm making this video. So one of the things that I try to do on this channel is when I'm reviewing models in my collection, I like to review models relatively close to when I order them. That way you all out there have a reasonable chance of getting one yourself. I think it's a bit disingenuous to make an awesome video about a model that is out of production and then, you know, someone gets really excited and then they go to buy it and they find out, oh, it's basically eBay only and it's going to cost an obscene amount of money to get. And that's just not an experience I want to impart if I can help it. So obviously with time, the further away from spring of 2023 you watch this video, the harder this is going to be to get. So if you are watching this close to when I publish the video in the month of March, definitely don't wait. If you are somebody who is thinking about adding the number 7 Super Hornet to your collection, if the information and the important role that this airplane shares and has in the Blue Angels world is an inspiring story to you, definitely consider buying this and buying it quick, because right now they're selling for about $155 US, and this is not one that's going to stay on sale for very long. So once again, if you have any thoughts of ordering it and you like the historical background and the importance of the number 7 Super Hornet, or if you have 1 through 6 and you just want one to complete your collection with, first of all, good on you for getting them all, because I certainly won't at this point. But if you are looking for one last number 2-seater to add to your collection, definitely do that, because once again, I believe that this is the most important Super Hornet in the list in terms of the missions that the Blue Angels actually have. So it deserves a spot in anyone's collection, and I would not wait or hesitate on ordering it. So with that, we will conclude the review here. Thank you all for tuning in. For those of you that have subscribed, thank you for your support. It is definitely appreciated. And for those of you who haven't subscribed, I would ask that you consider doing so. This way you'll be notified when I release a new video each week. So I target my videos to be released each Sunday morning. So if you are a subscriber, you will get a notification in your YouTube panel that I've uploaded a new video. So all of the reviews that you see on my channel are of models in my personal collection. I do not own a retailer or sell these models. So I don't have a shop or a venue or vendor relationship where I can do reviews of everything that's on the market. So what you see is just what I've paid for my own money to get. And I think this is one that's definitely worth, obviously, my own money to own. So hopefully this information has served some purpose for those of you that are making a buying decision or want to find out more about the Blue Angels or the FA-18 Super Hornet. Thank you for watching.